Hi there, Terry. This is Fabi, and I am going to make an attempt to make this video for you regarding some of the stuff that we talked about in our class today about the AccuFill program. We were actually discussing several different things that I want to address about our Hatch digitizing program. So you can see that I've got the program open and I am currently looking at my AccuFill folder that we've been putting some designs into for our class. But the main purpose of this video is basically going to be two different things. The first of which, we're going to be talking about the software settings that I was discussing with you in class today. And then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about those JPX files that we've been making in our AccuFill program. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say new so that I can get myself a design page open. And as I was mentioning to you earlier today, in the program, in software settings, there's going to be two different ways that the digitizing program will attempt to look at embroidery designs and analyze them. So the first way is basically here at the bottom. What you can see here is where once I've opened software settings and gone into embroidery settings, I'm going to have two different choices to tell my program what I want it to do. The first choice that is actually check marked here is where it wants to leave the stitches as individual stitches. Now, what this is talking about is whenever we are working with a stitch file, like a JEF format or whatever format our sewing machine brand happens to read, typically what we want to have happen is we don't want the software to try to change the stitch properties of that design. And so in those situations, we're going to want to keep the leave stitches as individual stitches selected. This is a good option for whenever we are combining several designs into one hooping. It's a good time also when all we want to do really is maybe watch a stitch simulation of a design file, or maybe we want to edit it by changing colors, that sort of thing. Simple editing and combining of designs. Our other option is for the program to convert the stitches into object shapes. So this is the biggie. When this digitizing program has this selected here, what it's going to do with that stitch file or that JEF file is it's going to take a little few seconds here and it's going to analyze it and it's going to try to figure out what the original digitizer intended for all of those objects. So what it will then do is it will convert all of those stitches into objects. Now, sometimes the program is going to do a really good job at that, and other times it won't do such a good job. So this is something that has to be done somewhat carefully, and there are some more advanced digitizing techniques where you can use this function to actually fix some bad designs. But at any rate, the reason that we were talking about that is because we were referring actually to our AccuFill program that we had been working in. And one of the things that we had been discussing also was that we were a little bit disappointed with the fact that the JPX design file that AccuFill is using could only be used in AccuFill. We were not able to open those designs in our AccuStitch program to add borders around them, for example, and we weren't able to open them in the other section of Horizon Link Suite. It was strictly an JPX file. And I had already explained to all of us in class that that JPX file is a different kind of a JPX than what can output from the Hatch digitizing program. So let me demonstrate that. For this point right now, I'm just going to say to leave these stitches as individual stitches. And I'm going to say, okay, later on we'll look at converting some of the files, stitch files into objects, just to give a little demonstration of that. Okay, first of all, what I'm going to demonstrate to you is that whenever you are in your program, you can transfer your designs that you have been working on here on the screen directly into your USB stick. But before you do this, you always need to make sure that you do something first before you hit this transfer button in order for this to work effectively. So what we're going to do is we would come up to the machine tab on our toolbar and we would look at the transfer settings. This is where if we happen to have a USB drive in our computer at this point, which I don't, you would first of all check what kind of a file you want your design to be saved and sent to your USB drive as. So you can see here that the last time I saved anything, I saved it as a JEF file. If I hit the downward arrow here, you're going to see that you can also output your design as a JPX. So this JPX, yes, it has the same name as the JPX in AccuFill, but it will operate just a little bit differently. This JPX here, we can actually open it up in our sewing machine. And if we were to take it into the edit mode of the sewing machine, we would be able to change colors on it or do, some other editing techniques to it. If you remember, the JPX that the AccuFill program creates, it can't even be edited in the machine. You can send it to the machine and stitch it out, but it won't even let you open it in the edit mode. So this one is a little bit more of an advanced JPX mode. All right, so then further on down the list, you would see all these other brands of machines that would be listed that you could output your design as. So if you wanted it to go as a JEF, then you would just make sure that JEF is what's highlighted here. Or if you wanted it to go as a JPX, you could also do that. Okay, either way, that's the first step of sending the design as you're in this transfer mode. And then the second one is that you would choose your location. So here you can see that the last time I saved a design, I did have my USB in my G drive and I had saved it into my EMVF folder. So what you do here is you would just click the browse button. You would try to find your USB here on the list. Of course, mine's not showing. And then you would just navigate into that folder. You would say OK, or you could even make yourself a new folder to put this new design that you're working on into. All right, so then once all that is set up, you would simply say OK here on the screen. And when you're ready to send your design, you can send it by hitting the transfer button. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. The next thing is let's take a look at some of our designs that we had made in the AccuFill program. This is my folder. Over here on the side, I'm looking at my AccuFill folder, and here's our machine cover. Here's my folder with my 7.5-inch designs. Here's some feathers that I have selected and saved here. And then these are those JPX files that we did in our layout of our AccuFill. Down here, you're going to see that here is your 3 David JPX that you and your husband worked on. And you're going to see that even though this is one that was created in AccuFill, I am going to be able to double click on it and I'm going to be able to open it up in my software program. When you do open a stitch file, like a JEF file or any of the other machine formats, you are always going to get this little message that is telling us that this is a non-native design. In other words, it's a stitch file. It's not a native object file that has been created in this software. So, you could always check mark this to say that you don't want to see this message again, but I keep it up. And it's just a reminder for me that every time I open a stitch file of any type, that it is a stitch file. And so I just need to always be conscious of that. So just say OK here and your design will open up. And there is a JPX file made in AccuFill that you can now take it here into your program. We can select our objects and we could resize them if we wanted to. So right now I just selected the feather in the center. I'm going to change the color on it so it looks a little bit different. And then you're going to be able to see that I can click on it and I can resize it if I wanted to. All right, one of the things that I also want you to notice is that I'm going to undo this. Whenever you resize a stitch file, when you're selected in your software settings, embroidery settings, and you're leaving those stitches as individual stitches, what's going to happen if you try to resize this design is it is not going to adjust the stitch count of that design very significantly. It might do it by a little bit, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on the design. So let's just select that feather circle. We're going to see that the overall design has 3,079 stitches in it. I'm looking down here at the status bar at the bottom right, 3,079. If I try to shrink this down, and we look at our status bar, we can see that it is now 3,073. So it lost, 6 stitches in that resizing. So basically what I'm saying is that because the software is just simply seeing this as a stitch file, it's not going to change it significantly. Okay, so that's going to be one of the issues if you try to open your JPX and you try to alter it very much in size. Let's undo, and actually what I'm going to do now with this same design is I'm going to save it as a JEF file. In your bottom left-hand corner, you've got this section for your output design. I don't know how much you've used your program, but this is where you're going to actually save designs and send them to your computer to save them permanently. If this is a design that was created in this software, it would be called a .emb design, object design. And in that case, you would use the Save Design As feature. So you would select it, you would navigate to the folder you want to put it into, and it would remain as a pure embroidery file for you to alter it again in the future. Since this is a stitch file, it came out of a JEF format that was built into our program, our Horizon Link program AccuFill section. We're not going to want to use Save Design As. We're going to choose the Export Design. Export means that you're simply sending this design somewhere else to save it. You will be able to choose your format. You will be able to save the name. So first of all, let's just call it 3 David, and it's going out as a JEF. And again, just like we could when we were looking at transfer settings, you could choose any number of formats to send it out as. So let's send it as a JEF. That way we can actually use this design file later in Horizon Link Suite or in the AccuStitch program. So let's save it, and there it goes, and it's ready for us to use it somewhere else. All right, I'm now going to delete this entire design, and I'm going to change my software settings to embroidery settings, and this time we're going to look at that same design as it's converted into object shapes. Okay, so a little change here. Let's go back to Manage Designs. Let's find that JPX version and open it, and we get that same warning message. Here we go, and here's our design. It doesn't look much different over in our object sequence bar. Although other designs that we open up, when it recognizes them as objects, might notice a significant difference over here in your object bar. We'll open another design in a while to see the difference. But what I want you to notice here is that even though the program is set to try to recognize these as native object files, we're not seeing over here on the side that it's made any significant change. And the other thing I want us to notice is, again, the stitch count. 3,074 stitches. If I select the feather in the middle and I try to resize it by shrinking it a little bit, normally, if this was a pure EMB file, I would see a significant change by making that so much smaller, and I did not see it. So what has happened here with this funny JPX file is that even though we are telling the software to look at it as objects, it's really not looking at it as objects. It's really just kind of kept it as a regular JPX or a regular JEF file. Okay, so that's one of the strange things about this JPX as it's working here in Hatch. All right, I'm going to select all of this, and I'm going to delete it. I'm now going to open up a design. I think what I'm going to do, actually, I haven't experimented with this time around. In the Manage Designs, let's try to see what happens if we look at the JEF file. Click on it, I'll get my warning. Oh, I didn't even get a warning. And this is very interesting because it's not even opening the file. And I don't know what that's all about. No, we don't need to save changes. Let's try it again. Maybe I just went too fast. Yeah, it looks like I just went too fast. Okay, so over here on the design list, we're now looking at a JEF file that the program is trying to analyze. I can see here that it's added in an empty spot here in my sequence. All of these little objects here are indications that it has now tried to analyze these and see them as objects. Okay, so what should typically happen here now is if I selected one of these, maybe that's probably not big enough. Let's go ahead and go with the circle in the middle. Let's notice it's 3,075 stitches. Let's see if it changes this JEF file when I shrink it really little. shrink it down, and no, it did not change the amount of stitches significantly. So again, this is just one of the things that I want us to always take notice of, is that even though the software is looking at this as objects, I think because of the way it was originally created as that JPX, somehow that has interfered with the process of how Hatch is working with these design files. Okay, so let me show you a different example of a stitch file. Go back to Manage Designs, and I'm just going to go further down into my embroidery designs. Now, I believe that this corner design that we started out with was an original Jeff file. So let's go ahead and open it. And my program is going to try to analyze it. We can see that over here on the right side that it is looking at things and it's trying to interpret what they are. This, for example, is an open object. And this is a little like, I don't know what you are. It's called a, a mystery. Sometimes there are jump stitches or tie-ins and tie-offs or things like that. Let's just select this top one here, and that's this brown section of the design. Our stitch count is 4,582. Let me grab this and let's shrink it down really little. 4,342. So it lost 200 stitches just by changing this. So what has happened here is this was a Jeff file that came from an anonymous place, converted it into objects. When I tried to change the size, it significantly changed the stitch count as well. So this is what you would normally be expected to happen when we have gone through this process. All right, so that's pretty neat. Another place that I discovered that we get some funny things going on when we have objects is back in this Manage Design section. We created these little motifs the other day using our, let's see, this one came out of Horizon Link Suite, and we used that little petal shape to create this little ball. And then this was decorative stitches that we had created in Horizon Link Suite in the Convert STX mode. So let's take a look at this one here first. All right, so remember it is a Jeff file. It has been converted into objects. We've got all these funny little things going on here. So what I'm going to do is just try to grab this section of the design. I'm going to change it into a different color so it looks a little different. Oh, actually, I got a little bit more than I intended to. Typically, when I do this, I try to grab the objects over here by holding down my control key and clicking until I've got everything that's part of that design. So yeah, probably about up to here would be, I think that these don't even have stitches, so I'm just going to delete those ones. Let's change it to into turquoise. Notice that our stitch count down on the bottom is 604. Let's grab this and make it bigger. And we have now increased our stitch count to 643. So again, this was a Jeff file that was created in our software program, and it did convert into some good objects over here for us. And it was all done because we had the software analyze it as objects. Okay, so let's change this to leave stitches. Let's cancel and close this ball motif, not saving changes, and I'm going to open it up again. This time it's being left as a stitch file. Let's zoom in on it a little bit, and there it is with the 599 stitches in it. Oh, something happened and it didn't actually, that didn't really take, did it? Let me just close out some of these things, just so we don't confuse our program a little bit. All right, let's open ball motif. Yeah, it's still wanting to recognize it as objects. Sometimes quirky things happen. Leave stitches. Okay. Let's see if it works this time. Let's open this one. Yeah, it's still trying to look at them as objects for some reason. Sometimes the program acts kind of weird when it does things like this. Anyway, I think you probably get the point of what I'm saying. Basically, what I'm saying is the Jeff file that has been created out of the JPX design is still acting like a regular stitch file. It's not adjusting stitches no matter if we try to make it be recognized as objects or whether or not we leave it as stitches. So that's the funny quirk of the designs that came out of AccuFill. All right, and then the other thing that we discovered is that other objects that are stitch files, we can alter them quite a bit just depending on what we do with the software settings. There's one other thing that I'm going to do. Let's see, let's go back to converting. I don't know if the program's going to behave or not. And I'm going to go ahead and open up one of the other built-in designs that came out of our program. So let me just navigate a little bit over here in my toolbar under my Horizon Link Suite. Let's just look at our AccuFill designs. And let's look at some of the stippling designs because we may be using some of these in our project. So I'm going to open up number 1. All right, number 1 is a Jeff file, but I'm trying to get the program to analyze it as objects. And there it is with all those funny objects. Let's just double check that that's what I had left it at. Okay, so I'm just going to see what will happen with this Jeff file if I try to resize it. Stitch count 4,334. Let's shrink it down little. 4,334 down to 3,562. So yes, it did adjust the stitch count. All right, let's close that and let's say no. We don't want to save it. Let's come back up to one of the previous files, and this time I'm going to change my settings again. The reason why I'm doing this is because one of the things that I had noticed when I had opened up a Jeff file that had come out of here a while ago was that it did not adjust the stitch count when I had it recognize objects. So here we go. Here it is as the full design with 4,335. Let's see. Control A, let's select the whole design. For some reason, it's not selecting everything. And let's try to shrink it from 4335 to 4323. So in all of that shrinking down, it kept all of, basically maintained the stitch count. So anyway, that's about all that I wanted to show you in this little video. I wanted to just reiterate to you the various things that you can make the software do simply by changing how you tell the computer program to look at your objects, either keeping them as stitches or converting them into objects. And then just the idiosyncrasies of those funny JPX files, but also the wonderful news that those JPX files that we created in AccuFill can be converted successfully into a Jeff file. And then, we could go ahead and try to open that Jeff file and we can shrink it or enlarge it a little bit, not significantly, but somewhat. And anyway, that will have saved us some hours of work with all those files we created. And anyway, that's about all I wanted to say for now. So I hope that this was a good video and it taught you something. And I thank you for watching. Bye for now.